Hey there, tonight we head towards the blood-soaked sands of ancient Rome. You've seen the Hollywood version, muscular men in leather straps, dramatic music, and heroic deaths. But the reality, it's so much worse. And you, yes, with your air conditioning and antibiotics, you probably wouldn't survive the first hour in a gladiator's sandals. So, before you drift off completely, like this video and subscribe, only if this kind of sleepy narration is your thing. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is on your end. Now, kill the overhead lights, maybe light a candle, and let's get into some history. Your day as a Roman gladiator begins not with glory, but with a rude awakening in the pre-dawn darkness. The ludus gladiatorius, your gladiatorial school, and prison stirs to life around 4 a.m. when a burly guard rattles the bars of your cell with a wooden baton. The sound reverberates through the stone corridors as dozens of men groan and stir from uncomfortable pallets. You're housed in what amounts to a glorified prison cell, often shared with several other fighters. The straw mattress beneath you is infested with lice, and the summer heat in these stone buildings is stifling, especially in the larger imperial ludi of Rome. Your cell is roughly 8 feet by 10 feet, with a small window placed high on the wall, not for your viewing pleasure, but to allow minimal ventilation while preventing escape. The air smells of sweat, urine, and the faint metallic scent of blood from yesterday's injuries. The stone floor is cold against your feet as you rise, joints aching from yesterday's training. You have approximately 3 minutes to empty your bladder into the communal latrine pot before the guards begin their second round of wake-up calls, which involve considerably more force. What might surprise you is that the ludus, despite its prison-like qualities, is actually considered a premium facility. Gladiators were expensive investments. After all, while you're not free, you're valuable property, which means you receive better treatment than the average Roman slave. But better is relative in a world where human life often holds little value. Your quarters are still squalid by modern standards, and the guards maintain order through routine beatings rather than gentle encouragement. Historian Michael Grant noted that gladiators were kept under the strictest security measures, which included being chained during sleeping hours in the earlier periods of gladiatorial combat. By the time of the Empire, this practice had somewhat relaxed in established schools, but new recruits, and those with escape attempts on their record, still endured the nightly chains. The constant chafing would leave permanent scars around your ankles and wrists if you lived long enough for scars to form. That is, as you shuffle out of your cell, you join a line of similarly disheveled men. Some bear fresh wounds from yesterday's training, a gashed forearm, a purpling bruise on the ribs, while others display the web of scars that mark veterans. These men move differently, with the careful gait of someone who knows exactly how much their body can take and how much it cannot. Few gladiators survived beyond their 3rd year of fighting. The veterans you see might have participated in as many as 10 matches, which makes them living legends. first task of your day is not breakfast, that comes later, but exercise performed on an empty stomach. Roman training theory, influenced by Greek athletic traditions, held that exercising before eating built greater endurance. So, with your stomach growling, you're herded into the main training area, a dirt-floored courtyard surrounded by high walls. Here, you'll begin with a series of calisthenics under the watchful eye of your doctor, the trainer, typically a former gladiator who earned his freedom through exceptional skill or longevity. This isn't a gentle warm-up, mind you. The doctor carries a long whip and doesn't hesitate to use it on lagging performers. The morning routine typically includes running laps around the courtyard while carrying increasingly heavy weights, followed by jumping exercises and strength-building movements. Remember, you're not being trained for health or longevity. You're being conditioned to provide maximum entertainment value during what might be a very short career. By the time the first hour of training concludes, your modern body would be in complete revolt. Your uncalloused feet would be bleeding from the rough ground, your muscles burning from exertion unfamiliar to contemporary physiology. While the modern gym enthusiast might pride themselves on their fitness, few have experienced the particular hell of training under the threat of physical punishment, with no rest days, no ergonomic equipment, and absolutely no concern for your long-term joint health. The sun is now cresting over the ludus walls, casting long shadows across the training ground. Your fellow gladiators' faces are streaked with sweat, their expressions ranging from grim determination to dull resignation. Some of these men were criminals sentenced to the arena as punishment. Others were prisoners of war, sold into this life after their defeat. A smaller number, perhaps, including you, volunteered, lured by the promise of fame and fortune, however short-lived. Regardless of how you arrived here, the morning light illuminates the same truth for all. You are now property, a weapon being honed for the entertainment of Rome. As the doctor finally calls an end to the morning exercises, you're permitted your first meal of the day. And here comes another surprise that might just seal your fate before you ever step foot in the arena. Roman gladiators ate nothing like the lean, protein-rich diets of modern athletes. Instead, you're about to sit down to a meal that would make a nutritionist weep, but for reasons that made perfect sense to your Roman handlers. The morning's brutal training has left you ravenous, but what awaits isn't exactly the protein-packed smoothie or balanced meal a modern athlete might expect. Instead, you're herded with your fellow gladiators into a communal dining area, a Spartan hall with long wooden tables worn smooth from years of use. The benches creak under the weight of dozens of muscular men as guards distribute the day's first meal. What lands in your wooden bowl with a wet plop is what contemporary archaeologists have dubbed the gladiator diet, and it's nothing like you'd imagine. Modern analysis of gladiator remains from Ephesus revealed something that would horrify today's fitness influencers. Gladiators were primarily vegetarian and intentionally carried significant body fat. The main component of your meal is a thick barley porridge mixed with beans and occasionally cheap vegetables like turnips or beets. It's bland, mushy, and lukewarm, but you'll eat every spoonful because it's all you're getting until evening. The portion is generous. Surprisingly, so your Lanista owner wants you well fed, but not with expensive meat or fish. Those are reserved for the wealthy citizens who will watch you fight. Archaeologists examining gladiator skeletons found unexpectedly high levels of strontium, indicating a diet based almost entirely on plant foods. They've also discovered that gladiators were known by the nickname horderai, literally barley men, because of their grain-heavy diet. It wasn't a compliment. It was a recognition of their distinctive dietary regimen. As you force down another spoonful of the gluey porridge, you might wonder why elite fighters weren't fed more protein. The answer is as practical as it is disturbing. Your trainers are deliberately fattening you up. That layer of fat tissue you're developing serves as protection for your vital organs and blood vessels. When a sword or trident pierces your skin, that subcutaneous fat might be the difference between a dramatic but survivable wound and immediate death from organ damage. Wait, you might think, wouldn't the extra weight slow me down? Absolutely it would by modern athletic standards. But remember, gladiatorial combat wasn't purely about efficiency or competitive advantage. It was entertainment. A slightly slower fighter meant a longer, more dramatic battle. Quick deaths didn't satisfy the crowd's bloodlust. They wanted prolonged spectacle, and your carb-loaded body was designed to provide exactly that. The second strange component of your diet is a calcium-rich beverage that the Romans called pasca, essentially vinegar water, sometimes mixed with ash. Archaeological evidence shows gladiators consumed calcium supplements in quantities far exceeding the average Roman citizen. Researchers believe this was deliberately administered to strengthen bones and speed the healing of fractures, a common occupational hazard in your new profession. This calcium drink tastes vile to your modern palate, sour, and with a strange mineral aftertaste from the ash. But the veterans around you drink it without complaint. One of them notices your grimace and laughs, a sound devoid of humor. "Better get used to it," he mutters. The ones who don't drink it are the ones whose bones snap like twigs in the arena. The meal is consumed quickly and in near silence. Conversation is minimal, partly from exhaustion after the morning exercises, partly because meaningful friendships are a luxury few can afford in a profession where you might be ordered to kill your training partners tomorrow. The veterans eat methodically, focusing on nothing but their food. You notice they've learned to ignore the discomforts that still distract you, the hard bench beneath you, the flies buzzing around the dining hall, the stench of dozens of unwashed bodies in close proximity. As plates are cleared away, a guard announces, which training groups will work with which doctors today. The dining hall empties with the grim efficiency of men who know that hesitation earns punishment. You follow your assigned group back to the training yard, your stomach uncomfortably full of barley and beans. By midday, the heavy breakfast makes sense. The combination of intense training and blazing sun has you dripping with sweat, your energy reserves depleting rapidly. The carbohydrate-heavy meal provides the sustained energy needed for hours of physical exertion. Modern athletes might prefer lean protein and complex carbs, but they're not preparing to bleed for public entertainment. Food in the ludus serves another, less obvious purpose: control. The quality and quantity of meals often depends on your performance in training. Excel, and you might receive honey with your porridge or an extra piece of bread. Slack off, and portions shrink accordingly. This form of behavioral management keeps you constantly striving to impress your trainers, even as your body screams for rest. Lunch, when it comes, is barely a meal at all, just a quick ration of dried fruit, nuts, and perhaps a small piece of cheese if your morning performance warranted it. You eat standing in whatever shade you can find, gulping water from a communal ladle between bites. The water itself is another health hazard drawn from wells that serve dozens of sweating, bleeding men daily. It's a breeding ground for bacteria your modern immune system has never encountered. Perhaps the most psychologically challenging aspect of the Gladiator diet is its relentless monotony. Day after day, the same barley porridge, the same bland vegetables, the same calcium drinks. Variety is non-existent. Even on feast days before major games, when you might receive meat, it's typically the cheapest cuts, boiled until barely recognizable. Some gladiators receive better food, the stars, the crowd favorites who have survived multiple games. You notice them at a separate table, their porridge supplemented with olive oil, honey, and occasionally even small portions of meat. These dietary privileges are dangled before you as incentives. Survive long enough, impress enough spectators, and you too might earn the right to a more palatable existence. By evening, after the day's second intense training session, you're served your final meal similar to breakfast, but slightly more substantial, often with the addition of legumes like lentils for extra protein. You eat with the mechanical determination of the truly exhausted, barely tasting the food. Your body, pushed beyond limits you didn't know existed, demands calories regardless of form or flavor. As you collapse onto your pallet that night, muscles aching and stomach distended with barley, you realize that the Gladiator diet, like everything else in this new life, serves a single purpose: to transform you into something both more and less than human, more durable, less individual, a weapon being forged through calculated nutrition, designed not necessarily to win, but to bleed impressively when you lose. Dawn breaks on your second day as a gladiator, and the real training begins in earnest. You've survived the wake-up call, choked down your barley breakfast. Now you stand in the training yard, wondering what fresh hell awaits. The answer comes in the form of the doctor, the chief trainer, who strides into the yard, carrying what appears to be a bundle of wooden sticks. These, he announces, holding up what you now recognize as wooden swords, will be your best friends until you prove you deserve steel. Training to die spectacularly is a specialized art form, one that modern combat sports, with their focus on safety and fair competition, wouldn't recognize. Roman gladiatorial training wasn't designed to create survivors. It was engineered to produce entertainers who could deliver a compelling death. The paradox of your training becomes immediately apparent. You must become skilled enough to put on a good show, but not so skilled that you dispatch opponents too quickly. The crowd didn't pay for efficiency. They paid for drama. The wooden training weapons, called rudies, weigh twice as much as the actual weapons you'll eventually use in the arena. This deliberate overweighting builds strength and makes the real weapons feel lighter when you finally wield them. It's actually a technique still used in modern sports training, but with one significant difference. You'll be training with these oversized implements for months, not as a periodic exercise, but as your exclusive equipment. A gladiator who moves slowly dies quickly, the doctor explains, demonstrating a series of strikes against a wooden post wrapped in rope. But a gladiator who dies quickly is worthless. This is the central conundrum of your new profession. Death is inevitable for most in your position, but a premature or unimpressive death represents a financial loss for your Lanista. You're being trained to extend your suffering for maximum dramatic effect. The morning session focuses on fundamental movements: how to stand, how to step, how to balance your weight. Gladiatorial combat was not the wild, chaotic slashing portrayed in modern films. It was a disciplined, almost ritualistic form of fighting with specific techniques and positions. Your modern instincts to duck, to retreat, to protect yourself at all costs are systematically beaten out of you. Instead, you're taught to stand your ground, to take hits on your shield, to make each movement visible and dramatic for spectators watching from a distance. Higher, the doctor shouts, whipping the ground near your feet as you raise your shield. The citizens in the upper seats need to see your fear. By midday, your arms tremble from holding the weighted training shield. Your shoulders burn from repeated practice strikes. Every muscle protests as you're paired with another novice for slow motion practice exchanges. The veterans watching from the shade of the colonnade occasionally call out corrections or mock your awkward movements. They've seen countless newcomers like you, most of whom are now feeding the worms beneath the arena sand. Archaeological evidence from gladiator training facilities in Pompeii reveals training areas organized by fighting style, with specialized equipment for each class of gladiator. You haven't yet been assigned a specific style. That will come later, after your trainers assess your physical attributes and determine gladiatorial type will best showcase them. For now, you're learning universal basics that apply across all specializations. The afternoon brings a new horror, pain conditioning. To perform well in the arena, you must learn to fight through injuries that would incapacitate an ordinary person. This is accomplished through systematic exposure to controlled pain. The method is simple and brutal. While practicing blocks with your shield, your opponent deliberately lands light strikes on exposed areas, not enough to cause serious injury, but enough to hurt. The point isn't merely to toughen you up. It's to teach you to continue performing while injured. In the arena, explains the doctor, walking between pairs of practicing fighters, a wound that doesn't kill you is merely part of the show. The crowd rewards those who bleed beautifully. More disturbing than the physical training is the psychological conditioning. You're not being prepared for combat in the military sense, where the goal is victory through any effective means. You're being molded into a performer whose job is to enact highly stylized violence according to specific cultural expectations. This includes learning how to fall dramatically when wounded, how to make non-lethal wounds appear more serious than they are, and most chillingly, how to die in a manner that satisfies the crowd's expectations. Veterans demonstrate the proper way to sink to your knees, the correct angle to slump forward, the appropriate timing for your final collapse. It's choreography for your eventual demise, and you're expected to master it regardless of actual pain or fear. If you must die, a scarred veteran tells the training group during a water break, make it memorable. The crowd remembers a good death. Your family might receive better treatment if you're remembered well. This is perhaps the most alien aspect of gladiatorial training for your modern sensibilities, the acceptance and aestheticization of your likely death. While modern athletes train to win, you're training simultaneously for victory and defeat, with the latter being the more probable outcome. Every gladiator knows the statistics. Few survive more than 10 matches. Many don't survive their first. By late afternoon, when the specialized training begins, you're introduced to the palace, a wooden training post that will become your most consistent opponent. Hours are spent striking this inanimate enemy, developing muscle memory for the limited but essential repertoire of moves appropriate to arena combat. The repeated thudding of wood against wood echoes across the training yard as dozens of men attack their posts with methodical precision. Again, shouts the doctor when someone's rhythm falters. The crack of his whip provides motivation where internal discipline fails. What never appears in your training regimen are techniques for self-preservation that might reduce the spectacle. You're never taught to end a fight quickly and efficiently. You're never instructed on targeting the most vulnerable points of the human body. Instead, you learn to target the visually impressive but less immediately fatal areas: the muscular thigh, the fleshy shoulder, the forearm. As the day's training finally ends, drag your battered body toward the bathhouse, a luxury afforded to gladiators not out of kindness, but to maintain their physical condition. You begin to understand the fundamental truth of your situation. You're not being trained to survive. You're being trained to die in a manner that will entertain thousands of cheering spectators. Your death, when it comes, will not be a tragedy, but the fulfillment of your purpose in this bizarre economic and cultural system. The ultimate irony of gladiatorial training is that the very skills that might save your life in the arena, pragmatic fighting techniques focused on rapid incapacitation of an opponent, are precisely what you're not being taught. Your value lies not in your ability to survive, but in your capacity to participate convincingly in a blood ritual that satisfies Rome's complex relationship with violence, virtue, and mortality. After a week of training, the legal reality of your situation begins to sink in with brutal clarity. During a rare moment of rest, you overhear two veterans discussing a gladiator who attempted escape the previous night. The punishment wasn't just severe, it was terminal and public. The man's death served as both entertainment and warning. "Service pony," mutters one of the older gladiators, noticing your eavesdropping. "Slave of punishment. That's what we are in the eyes of Roman law." The legal status of a gladiator was among the lowest in Roman society, a fact that would significantly impact your chances of survival. While popular entertainment typically portrays gladiators as athletes with agency, men who could earn freedom through prowess, the historical reality was far more constrained. Most gladiators were legally classified as service pony, a designation that stripped them of even the limited rights afforded to regular slaves. This classification meant you had effectively undergone a form of civil death. You could not marry legally, could not own property, could not make contracts, and could not testify in court except under torture. Your word held no weight against that of even the lowliest free citizen. This legal vulnerability would shape every aspect of your gladiatorial experience, from training to combat to whatever brief afterlife your fame might enjoy. For those who entered the ludus as criminals condemned to the arena, damnati ad ludos, this legal death was literal. They were already considered executed in the eyes of the law. Their continued physical existence merely a temporary state before their inevitable bloody end. Even if you entered gladiatorial service voluntarily, octorati, you surrendered most of your legal personhood through the gladiatorial oath. This oath, recorded by Petronius in the Satyricon, bound you to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword, essentially signing away your bodily autonomy. The oath ceremony itself was designed to formalize your dehumanization. You would have been symbolically struck with a rod, marking the moment when your body became another's property. At meal time, you might notice a subtle hierarchy among the gladiators. The condemned criminals eat last and receive the poorest portions. The volunteers, often desperate freedmen or bankrupted citizens who sold themselves to escape debt receive marginally better treatment. At the top of this inverted social pyramid sit the prisoners of war, particularly those from tribes or nations renowned for their fighting prowess. Their value as exotic spectacles means they receive better food, better equipment, and occasionally better quarters. Your legal status affects more than just your daily treatment. It fundamentally shapes your chances of survival. When injuries occur during training, the Lanista must make cold calculations about the cost of medical treatment versus your potential value. For those of lowest status, even moderate injuries might result in being discarded, either through outright execution or through assignment to the most lethal forms of arena combat. See that man? An older gladiator points discreetly to a trainer working with elite fighters across the yard. He was once service pony like most of us, survived 30 bouts. Emperor himself granted him freedom. Now he's citizen again, trains the rest of us to die well. Such stories of successful transitions from condemned man to free citizen were rare enough to become legendary within the ludus. Historians estimate that fewer than 1 in 10 gladiators ever earned manumission through arena performance. For the vast majority, the legal death that began their gladiatorial career was merely the preamble to their physical death. Your status affects even the weapons you're permitted to train with. As a novice of low legal standing, you're given the most basic equipment, often damaged or worn from previous use. The wooden practice swords assigned to you are splintered and unbalanced. Meanwhile, the rare volunteer from a higher social class trains with higher quality implements under the direct supervision of senior doctors. This disparity in training resources creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Those with better initial status receive better training, perform better in the arena, achieve more victories, and thus stand a greater chance of eventual freedom. Roman law further complicated matters by creating bizarre legal contradictions in the gladiator's status. Despite being considered effectively dead in civil terms, gladiators could still earn money through their performances. These earnings were held in trust by the Lanista, theoretically accumulating toward the enormous sum required to purchase one's freedom. However, the Lanista also charged for food, lodging, training, and equipment, costs that conveniently tended to offset any potential savings. My purse grows and shrinks with equal speed, jokes a veteran during the evening meal, though his eyes remain cold. 5 years I've fought, and somehow I'm always just a few denarii short of buying my freedom. The legal ambiguity of your position creates other peculiar situations. While you can't legally marry, your sexual appeal as a gladiator might lead to unofficial relationships with free women from the town surrounding the ludus. These affairs, conducted through barred windows or during supervised excursions, are technically criminal offenses. A free woman who consorts with a gladiator could face severe penalties, including loss of property or citizenship status. Yet another paradox emerges in how your body is simultaneously devalued and commodified. While your life holds little legal worth, your trained physique represents a significant financial investment. This leads to the strange situation where injuring a gladiator outside of sanctioned combat becomes a property crime, not against you, but against your owner. If someone were to break your arm in a tavern brawl during one of your rare, supervised outings to town, they would be liable for damages paid not to you, but to the Lannister, whose property value diminished. The tattoos that were painfully applied during your first days at the Ludus, elaborate designs, identifying you as property of a specific Lannister or school, serve as both advertisement and tracking mechanism. These permanent marks ensure that even if you did manage to escape, you would be readily identifiable as fugitive property. Roman citizens were legally obligated to report escaped gladiators, with rewards offered for their capture and penalties for assisting them. Perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of your legal non-personhood is the knowledge that your death, when it inevitably comes, will carry no legal consequences for your killer. A fellow gladiator who strikes the fatal blow in sanctioned combat bears no legal responsibility. He was simply a tool wielded by the spectacle's organizers. Your death will be recorded as inventory loss, a business expense written off against the profits of the games. The rare gladiator who survives long enough to receive the wooden sword of freedom, Rudy's, must navigate a complex legal reintegration. While technically freed from gladiatorial service, you would not automatically regain full citizenship rights. Instead, you would occupy the legal status of a freedman, with ongoing obligations to your former Lannister, who would become your patron. Your newfound freedom would be conditional, precarious, and perpetually shadowed by your past. As you settle onto your sleeping pallet at night, the weight of your legal status presses down more heavily than the physical exhaustion of training. You realize that before you ever face an opponent in the arena, you've already been defeated by a system that transformed you from a person into property, not just physically owned, but legally nullified. Tomorrow's training will build your body, but nothing can restore the civil existence that was extinguished the moment you entered the Ludus gates. The morning brings a change to your routine. Instead of immediately beginning training after breakfast, you're lined up with other novices for inspection. A well-dressed man walks slowly down the line, accompanied by your Lannister. His tunic is of fine wool with a purple stripe, a clear indication of wealth and status. He studies each gladiator with the critical eye of someone assessing livestock at market. This one has potential, he says, pausing before a muscular Thracian prisoner. Good shoulder width. How is his temperament? Resistant at first, your Lannister replies, but he's learning discipline. Should be ready for the Cerealia Games. This, you're learning, is the fundamental economic reality of your existence. You are not merely a fighter, you're an investment, a business asset with a clear profit and loss calculation attached to your breathing body. The man conducting the inspection is an editor, a wealthy citizen, or magistrate responsible for staging gladiatorial games. He's shopping for talent to feature in upcoming festivals, and your Lannister is eager to secure contracts for his fighters. The economics of the gladiatorial system were sophisticated and ruthless. Historical records from Pompeii reveal detailed accounting of gladiatorial expenses and revenues. Your Lannister has invested a considerable sum in acquiring you, whether through purchase at a slave market, accepting you as a condemned criminal from state authorities, or paying a contract fee if you're one of the rare volunteers. This initial acquisition cost is just the beginning of his financial commitment. Your daily food, though monotonous, represents a significant expense when multiplied across the years of training required to produce a combat-ready gladiator. The barley porridge you complain about costs more than what an average laborer might eat. Your medical care, primitive though it seems, requires specialized physicians whose services don't come cheap. Even the calcium supplement drinks are a calculated investment in maintaining and extending your fighting lifespan. Too thin, the editor says dismissively as he passes you. Not enough spectacle there yet. Perhaps next season. Being rejected is actually a small blessing. It means more months of training before facing the arena. But it also means your Lannister might decide you're consuming resources without providing adequate return on investment. Later that day, you notice your food portion is slightly smaller than before. Resources are being reallocated to more promising assets. The financial structure of the ludus operated on a fundamental calculation. Each gladiator needed to generate more revenue through fighting than they cost in maintenance. This equation influenced every aspect of your experience, from your training regimen to your fighting style, to the medical care you received when injured. Contracts for gladiatorial appearances were complex affairs. Your Lannister would negotiate a base fee for your participation, with bonuses for victories or particularly impressive performances. Historical evidence suggests these appearance fees varied dramatically based on a gladiator's reputation and fighting record. A novice might earn his Lannister merely 1,000 sestertii per appearance, while celebrated fighters could command 15,000 or more. If you died in combat, your Lannister would typically receive a death compensation fee from the game's sponsor, usually between 1/2 and 2/3 of your purchase price. This created a perverse incentive system. Ideally, your owner wanted you to survive and fight repeatedly, generating ongoing revenue. However, if your performance declined or you suffered debilitating injury, a heroic death might be the most profitable outcome from a business perspective. During afternoon training, you're paired with a more experienced gladiator who has survived 3 arena appearances. He moves differently than the other veterans, cautiously, favoring his left side, where a partially healed sword wound still puckers the skin. The Lannister almost sold me to the mines after this, he tells you, indicating the injury. Said I'd be more profitable breaking rocks than fighting with a weak guard. Changed his mind after I promised to win my next bout. This casual comment reveals another economic reality of your situation. When a gladiator's fighting value diminished, they might be sold to mines or other brutal labor contexts where a strong body could still generate return even if no longer arena-worthy. The threat of such a fate, worse even than the arena in many respects, motivated injured gladiators to return to fighting before fully healed, often with fatal consequences. The economics affected your training as well. You notice that certain gladiators receive more attention from trainers, better equipment, and more intensive coaching. These aren't random choices, but calculated investments. Your Lannister concentrates resources on fighters most likely to generate significant returns. As a novice who hasn't yet proven your value, you receive just enough training to become functional, not exceptional. Why do they waste oil on that one? You ask a fellow novice, nodding toward a Germanic fighter receiving a lengthy massage after training. He's contracted for the consul's games next month, comes the reply. 20,000 sestertii for 3 days of fighting. The Lannister wants him in peak condition. The cost-benefit calculation extends to your fighting style as well. Once your natural attributes are assessed, you'll be assigned a gladiatorial type that maximizes your entertainment value. Tall, imposing figures might become the heavily armored secutors. Quicker, more agile fighters might train as reshgari, wielding nets and tridents. This specialization isn't based on your preference or even your aptitude, but on what will create the most dramatic matchups in the arena. Even your wounds are subject to economic analysis. After a particularly brutal training session, where a practice sword breaks your skin despite its blunted edge, you're attended by the ludus physician. He cleans the wound efficiently, but uses the cheapest available treatments. Had you been a prize fighter, you might have received expensive herbal poultices to prevent scarring. As an unproven investment, you get vinegar, rough stitching, and instructions to keep training. We're like racing horses, explains a Gallic gladiator during the evening meal. Valuable only until we break a leg. My advice: become valuable enough that they'll set the broken leg instead of making glue from you. The financial realities of the system create strange incentives. Survival depends not just on fighting skill, but on entertainment value. A gladiator who wins efficiently, but without drama, might be worth less than one who loses spectacularly. The crowds, and thus the paying sponsors, want memorable spectacle above all. This leads to the disturbing truth that your best financial strategy might involve deliberate risk-taking and flashy, crowd-pleasing techniques rather than the safest fighting approach. One peculiar aspect of gladiatorial economics that becomes apparent as you spend more time in the ludus, is the betting system. Gambling on matches was ubiquitous in Roman society, and your Lanista almost certainly participates. This creates complicated and sometimes contradictory incentives. While ostensibly wanting his fighters to succeed, a Lanista might occasionally profit more from strategic losses, particularly if outside betting odds can be exploited. By the time evening falls and you're cleaning your practice equipment, you've gained a new perspective on your situation. Your life and death aren't merely matters of combat skill or luck, they're business decisions within a complex economic framework. Your Lanista doesn't see you as a person or even primarily as a fighter. He sees you as an asset with acquisition costs, maintenance expenses, potential revenue, and depreciation calculations. As you lie on your pallet that night, you realize that the greatest threat to your survival might not be the enemy gladiator you'll eventually face, but the cold mathematics that determines whether keeping you alive remains profitable. In the ledger book that ultimately controls your fate, you are simply a number that must remain positive to justify your continued existence. After weeks of basic training, the moment finally arrives when you're assigned your specific gladiatorial type. The doctors have been watching you closely, assessing your physical attributes, reaction times, and natural fighting instincts. Now your fate is decided not by your preferences, but by how your body can best serve the spectacle. You, the chief doctor, points at you with his vine staff. Threeks. Just like that, your fighting style, armor, weapons, and likely manner of death are determined. The Threeks, or Thracian, fights with a small rectangular shield and a curved sword called a sika. Your left leg will be heavily armored, your right leg less so. You'll wear an ornate helmet with a stylized griffin crest. Most importantly, you now know your usual opponents will be myrmidons, fighters equipped with large shields and straight swords, who typically target the less protected areas of the Threeks' body. The gladiatorial types weren't arbitrary distinctions, but carefully crafted fighting styles designed to create dramatic and balanced combat scenarios. Each had specific weapons, armor configurations, and tactical approaches that played against each other in predictable yet exciting ways. Like professional wrestling, but with actual death, these matchups followed familiar patterns that allowed spectators to anticipate the flow of combat while still being surprised by individual performances. Historical records and artwork have revealed at least a dozen distinct gladiator types, each with specialized equipment and fighting techniques. The major types included the myrmillo, characterized by a fish-shaped helmet and large rectangular shield, armed with a gladius, short sword. These were often matched against Thracians or Retarii. The Retarius, one of the most distinctive types, who fought with a net, trident, and dagger, wearing minimal armor. Their fighting style was highly mobile, attempting to entangle opponents with the net before striking with the trident. The secutor, developed specifically to counter the Rotarius, wore a streamlined helmet with minimal protrusions that could be caught in a net. The hoplomachus, equipped in the style of Greek hoplite soldiers with round shield and spear. The provocator, who fought with equipment similar to Roman legionaries. The Dimicaris, a rare type who wielded 2 swords and minimal armor, relying on speed and aggression. Your assignment as a Threeks isn't random. The doctors have noted your quickness and relatively smaller stature. The curved Sika sword suits your build better than the heavier Gladius, and the fighting style emphasizes agility over brute strength. What they don't tell you, but what becomes obvious as training progresses, is that the Threeks historically had one of the lower survival rates among gladiatorial types. The curved blade is your best friend, explains the weapons master, placing the distinctive Sika in your hands for the first time. It can hook behind your opponent's shield or slip between plates of armor. But remember, it's designed for dramatic, slashing wounds that please the crowd, not for quick kills. This is your first introduction to the disturbing reality that your weapons are designed as much for spectacle as for combat effectiveness. The curved Thracian sword creates visually impressive wounds that bleed profusely without necessarily being immediately fatal. This is by design. A quick death deprives the audience of the drama they've paid to see. Training now becomes more specialized as you learn the techniques specific to your assigned type. Hours are spent practicing the distinctive Thracian fighting stance, crouched low behind your small shield, left leg forward. The stance feels awkward and unnatural to your modern biomechanics, but it has a purpose. It presents a smaller target while maximizing your ability to thrust upward with the curved blade. The armor you're fitted for further shapes your fighting style and survival chances. The Threeks typically wore a manica arm guard on the sword arm, a wide belt balteus, a loincloth sublegaculum, protective leg wrappings, and most distinctively, a greave acria that covered the left leg from ankle to above the knee. This asymmetrical protection creates both advantages and vulnerabilities that define Thracian fighting technique. Your left leg is forward and protected because it's the natural target for a Murmillo's strike, explains a veteran Threeks during training. But never forget your right leg is exposed. One good hit there, and you'll be fighting from your knees, and few survive that position. The distinctive helmets worn by different gladiator types weren't simply for identification or decoration, though they certainly served those purposes. The visored helmet of the Threeks, with its broad brim and griffin-shaped crest, provided crucial protection while simultaneously restricting vision and breathing. Training while wearing these helmets was a special kind of torment. The metal heated quickly under the Mediterranean sun, turning the interior into something approaching an oven. You must learn to fight half-blind and struggling for breath. The doctor tells your training cohort as you practice basic movements in full armor for the first time. In the arena, panic from heat and restricted vision kills as many gladiators as enemy weapons. Archaeological evidence has revealed the truth of this statement. Examinations of gladiator skeletons show that many suffered from chronic respiratory issues, likely caused by frequent training and fighting in restrictive helmets. The full gladiatorial outfit could weigh between 30 and 40 pounds, lighter than legionary armor, but designed with different priorities. Where military armor prioritized mobility and protection, gladiatorial equipment balanced protection with visibility. For the audience of vulnerable areas, what becomes increasingly clear as you advance in specialized training is that each gladiatorial type has specific expected moves, almost like a violent choreography. While combat outcomes weren't predetermined, the fighting styles followed conventional patterns that audiences recognized and anticipated. This wasn't sport in the modern sense of fair competition. It was theatrical violence with lethal consequences. When you face a murmillo, instructs your trainer, he will press forward, using his larger shield to pin you back. You are expected to give ground initially, appearing vulnerable. This builds tension. Only then do you counterattack, darting inside his guard. The crowd must believe you're in danger before you show your skill. This performative aspect extends even to how you receive wounds. As a Threeks, you're taught to take non-fatal injuries dramatically. A slice across the shoulder or thigh should be acknowledged with a visible reaction that plays to the crowd while allowing combat to continue. Blood is an essential element of the spectacle, and gladiators who failed to bleed impressively rarely became crowd favorites regardless of their skill. The specialized weapons training transforms your body in specific ways. The constant practice with the curved sika develops asymmetrical musculature. Your sword arm becomes significantly more developed than your shield arm. Skeletal remains of gladiators show these occupational markers clearly. With bone density and muscle attachment, sights dramatically more developed on weapon-bearing arms. Not all gladiatorial types were created equal in terms of survival prospects. Contemporary records suggest that heavily armored types like the secutor had better survival rates than more lightly equipped fighters like the Retiarius. Your assignment as a Threeks places you somewhere in the middle of this hierarchy, not the most protected, but not the most vulnerable either. The best outcome, confides a veteran Threeks during a rare moment of candor, is to be matched against another Threeks. The crowd enjoys the mirror match less, so they're more likely to grant missio, mercy, to the defeated fighter. Against a murmillo or secutor, only a truly exceptional performance saves you once you're down. By the time you've completed a month of specialized training, your body has been reshaped according to the requirements of your assigned type. Your left leg muscles have developed differently from constant forward positioning. Your right arm has thickened from endless practice cuts. Your neck has strengthened to support the heavy helmet. You've been physically transformed into what Roman society needed you to be, not just a fighter, but a specific category of entertainment provider, whose eventual death is expected to follow established patterns. The most unsettling realization comes during a training exercise when you successfully execute a complex move against a practice opponent, instinctively following the patterns drilled into you. For a brief moment, you feel a surge of pride in your developing skill, before remembering that you've simply become more proficient at participating in the system designed to kill you spectacularly. The inevitable happens during your third month of training. While practicing advanced parrying techniques with a more experienced gladiator, you misjudge the distance and take a blunted but still forceful practice sword directly to your forearm. The crack is audible across the training yard, and the searing pain tells you immediately that the bone has fractured. This is the moment when the reality of gladiatorial medical care reveals itself in all its primitive horror. As you cradle your injured arm, two attendants half carry you to the Ludus Infirmary, a room that would make modern medical professionals recoil in disgust. The gladiatorial surgeon, or medicus, is a weathered man with calloused hands that smell faintly of wine and a stronger undertone of something herbal. He examines your arm with clinical detachment, pressing painfully along the break to assess the damage. Unlike elite Roman physicians who treated the wealthy citizens, gladiator doctors were typically former military surgeons or even experienced slaves with practical medical knowledge. Their approach prioritized functionality over comfort or long-term health. "Clean break," he announces. "Easier to fix than the compound fractures we usually see." Without further preamble, he nods to his assistants who grip you firmly by the shoulders and legs. Hold him steady. What follows is a bone-setting procedure without anesthesia, beyond a leather strap thrust between your teeth to bite down on. The pain as the medicus manipulates the broken bone back into alignment is transcendent, pushing beyond your modern pain threshold into a realm of sensation your contemporary nervous system was never prepared to process. Many gladiators lost consciousness during such procedures, a mercy you're unfortunately denied, as your body stubbornly remains awake through the ordeal. Archaeological evidence from gladiator graveyards provides a grim testament to the medical practices you're experiencing firsthand. Skeletal remains show numerous healed fractures, often with visible misalignment. Unlike the general Roman population, gladiator skeletons frequently display evidence of surgical intervention: saw marks on bones, trepanation holes in skulls, and the distinctive patterns of amputations. These were men whose bodies were economic assets, worth repairing even through brutally invasive means. He needs a splint and poultice. The medicus tells an assistant after aligning your broken bone. The usual mixture: wine, vinegar, and wool grease. This concoction represents the height of Roman sports medicine, a combination of wine for its mild antiseptic properties, vinegar to reduce swelling, and lanolin from sheep's wool as a binding agent. While modern analysis has confirmed some limited efficacy in this treatment, it falls catastrophically short of contemporary medical standards. Infection remains a constant, deadly risk. The splint applied to your arm consists of wooden slats bound tightly with linen strips, immobilizing the break at the cost of persistent discomfort. Unlike modern orthopedic casts designed to distribute pressure evenly, this ancient equivalent creates pressure points that will leave your skin raw and blistered by the time it's removed. 3 weeks before you resume sword work, the medicus informs you, already turning his attention to the next injured gladiator waiting on a nearby bench. Light conditioning starts tomorrow. The Lanista doesn't pay for idle bodies. This casual dismissal reveals another brutal reality of gladiatorial medicine. Recovery periods were determined by economic calculations rather than actual healing timeframes. Modern orthopedics would recommend 6 to 8 weeks for a simple forearm fracture to heal properly. Your training will resume long before the bone has fully knit, increasing the risk of re-injury and permanent deformity. During your recovery period, you observe the treatment of other injured gladiators, each case more disturbing than the last. A deep thigh wound is cauterized with a red-hot iron, the sizzle of burning flesh accompanied by screams that echo through the infirmary. A dislocated shoulder is wrenched back into place through brute force application of leverage. A concussed fighter, still disoriented from a blow to the helmet during training, is administered a tincture of opium and mandrake that renders him insensate, but does nothing to address the potential brain swelling. The skull wounds are worst, confides an assistant medicus as he changes your poultice on the 3rd day. Half die from the fever that follows. The others, he taps his own forehead significantly. Never fight the same again. Better to take a clean blade through the gut than a mace to the helmet. Skeletal evidence confirms this observation. Roman medical writers like Celsus described treatments for various gladiatorial injuries, including detailed procedures for skull fractures. These accounts mention the high mortality rate for head injuries and the common practice of trepanation, drilling holes in the skull to relieve pressure from internal bleeding. Archaeologists have found gladiator remains with healed trepanation marks, indicating some survived this procedure, though likely with significant cognitive impairments. While confined to light duties during your recovery, you're assigned to assist in the infirmary, providing a front-row view of the medical practices that might eventually be applied to your own more serious injuries. The experience is both educational and terrifying. You watch as a severely wounded gladiator undergoes amputation of his mangled foot, a procedure performed with disturbing efficiency, using specialized bone saws and cauterizing irons. The speed is necessary not for the patient's benefit, but because rapid completion reduces blood loss. Tourniquets are applied. The cut is made through calculated anatomy, and major blood vessels are immediately sealed with hot metal. The whole gruesome process takes less than 5 minutes. "He's one of the fortunates," remarks the senior medicus afterward. "Clean cut, good cauterization. If the wound fever doesn't take him, he can be sold to a mine or as a bath attendant. Better than the arena death that awaited him." This calculus, that a crippling amputation represents good fortune, illuminates the inverted value system of gladiatorial medicine. Success isn't measured in restored health or function, but in continued economic utility of the human property being repaired. The primitive nature of infection control becomes apparent as you observe post-surgical care. While Roman medicine recognized the importance of wound cleaning, the germ theory of disease remained millennia in the future. Dressings were changed infrequently, often only after visible soiling or foul odor indicated problems. Cross-contamination between patients was constant, with the same instruments and hands moving from one wounded gladiator to the next, with minimal cleaning between cases. The treatments themselves reflected a strange mixture of practical observation and magical thinking. Effective herbal antiseptics like garlic and honey were applied alongside useless or harmful substances like lead compounds and animal dung. Prayer and superstition played roles equal to practical intervention. Before major procedures, sacrifices might be made to Asclepius, the god of healing, while the actual surgical techniques remained dangerously rudimentary. The pharmacology available to gladiatorial physicians was similarly mixed in efficacy. Pain management relied heavily on opium derivatives and alcoholic preparations, which did provide real analgesic effects, but at the cost of respiratory depression and impaired healing. Herbal anti-inflammatories like willow bark, containing salicylates related to modern aspirin, were used alongside completely ineffective treatments based on humoral theory. As your own recovery progresses, you gain unwelcome insight into the psychological aspects of gladiatorial medicine. The constant pain, untreated except for occasional wine rations, creates a state of perpetual stress. Sleep becomes difficult, further impairing healing. The knowledge that you'll return to training before full recovery creates anxiety that manifests physically in muscle tension and digestive disturbances. The mind breaks before the body for many, explains a veteran gladiator who visits the infirmary daily to have a chronic shoulder wound cleaned. After enough injuries, some walk into their opponent's blade just to end the cycle. By the time you're cleared to resume modified training, your fractured arm has begun to heal, but not without complications. bone has knit imperfectly, creating a slight bend in your forearm that will permanently affect your sword grip. This deformity might have been prevented with modern orthopedic intervention, but in the gladiatorial context, it's considered an acceptable outcome. You remain functional as a fighter, if somewhat compromised. Your brief immersion in Roman sports medicine leaves you with the sobering realization that injury in the arena wouldn't just mean pain and potential death from the wound itself, but the possibility of suffering through treatments almost as traumatic as the original injury. The gladiatorial medical system, like every other aspect of this institution, wasn't designed for your welfare, but for the maintenance of valuable property, until such time as that property no longer justified the investment required to repair it. 6 months into your gladiatorial training, the news ripples through the ludus like an electric current. Your cohort has been selected for the upcoming Cerealia Games. Within days, you'll be facing actual combat, not the controlled practice of the training yard. This announcement initiates a series of pre-game rituals so laden with psychological and cultural significance that they constitute an experience as intense as the combat itself. The first change comes at evening meal. Your usual barley porridge is replaced by a more substantial offering: bread, roasted meat, dried fruits, even a measure of undiluted wine. This is the cena libera, or free dinner, traditionally given to condemned men before execution. The parallel is not lost on you or your fellow fighters. Eat well, advises a veteran who survived his first matches the previous year. Some believe a fuller belly protects the organs from deep blade penetration. Others say it gives the crowd a better show when you're gutted. Either way, it's the best meal you'll have until you win, if you win. The improvement in diet isn't mere tradition, but calculated physical preparation. The additional protein and carbohydrates provide energy reserves for the extreme exertion of combat. The wine serves dual purposes as liquid courage and mild analgesic. What no one mentions is that a slightly inebriated gladiator also makes for more dramatic, less calculated fighting, exactly what the crowd desires. Following the meal comes one of the more unusual ritual requirements: sexual abstinence. For at least 8 days before combat, gladiators were strictly forbidden from sexual activity of any kind. This prohibition was rooted in the Roman belief that male essence was finite and expended during ejaculation. Contemporary physicians like Galen explicitly wrote that sexual activity diminished physical strength and made men less courageous in the face of danger. Archaeological evidence confirms the seriousness with which this prohibition was enforced. Ludus ruins show segregated quarters becoming even more strictly monitored before games. Some training facilities even administered herbal preparations believed to reduce sexual desire during the pre-competition period. The Romans weren't alone in this belief, Similar prohibitions existed across many ancient sporting traditions. The night before the games brings another ritual, the writing of wills. Although you legally have minimal property rights, gladiators were permitted to designate the distribution of their fighting prizes and personal effects. For many, this meant directing payments to family members, or more commonly, to ensure proper funeral arrangements, while regular citizens might qualify for burial club memberships, collegia funerititia, that provided decent interment. Gladiators typically had to make their own provisions or risk ending in a common grave. Write clearly suggests your cell neighbor as you scratch your simple wishes onto a wax tablet. The lanista has been known to misinterpret final requests when they involve money owed. The physical preparations intensify as well. The day before combat, you're taken to the bathhouse attached to the ludus, a luxury normally reserved for weekly use. Here, you're scraped clean with strigils, oiled, and massaged to optimal physical condition. Your growing collection of scars is highlighted with oil to ensure visibility from the distant seats of the arena. Hair is cropped short to prevent opponents from gaining handholds and to reduce infection risk from head wounds. Most disconcerting is the ritual depilation. Body hair is removed from chest, arms, and legs using hot resin or sharp blades. This practice served multiple purposes. It prevented hair from being pulled into wounds, a major infection risk. It displayed musculature more dramatically for the audience, and it created another visual distinction between the civilized Roman spectators and the barbaric gladiators performing for them. The first time is worst, a Gallic gladiator tells you during the depilation process, noticing your discomfort. Eventually, you stop thinking of it as your body at all. It belongs to Rome now. They're just preparing their property for display. The evening before the games brings a ceremony that few modern combat sports would recognize, the banquet of the dead. In this ritual, witnessed by paying spectators from wealthy Roman families, gladiators due to fight the next day dine together in their fighting teams. The meal is elaborate by gladiatorial standards, and the combatants are expected to display both camaraderie and fatalistic humor. Even men who may kill each other tomorrow break bread as brothers tonight. Historical accounts describe these banquets as popular social events where wealthy Romans could interact with gladiators, request autographs, typically scratched into small clay tablets, and place early bets on the next day's outcomes. For the fighters, it represented a complex psychological challenge, maintaining dignity and courage while essentially participating in their own wake. Smile for the patrons, instructs a veteran under his breath as wealthy observers circulate through the banquet hall. They pay extra to attend these feasts to see men laughing in death's face. Those who show fear receive no favors tomorrow. The morning of the games arrives with its own set of rituals. You're awakened earlier than usual and given a light breakfast typically watered wine and bread, designed to provide energy without causing digestive discomfort during combat. Prayers and sacrifices are conducted, sometimes by the gladiators themselves, but more often by designated religious officials who serve the ludus or the game's sponsors. These religious observances weren't mere formalities. Archaeological evidence from gladiator barracks includes numerous religious artifacts, small statuettes of patron deities, protective amulets, and votive offerings. Many gladiators developed intense personal devotions, particularly to deities associated with fate, fortune, and the underworld. Mercury, conductor of souls to the afterlife, was especially popular among fighters facing imminent mortality. Your weapons are ritually prepared and blessed. Unlike practice weapons, these are lethal implements, sharpened to killing edges. You're permitted to hold and test your assigned equipment, a crucial moment, as balance and weight can vary significantly, even among supposedly identical weapons. Some gladiators had personal superstitions about their equipment, requesting specific swords that had proven lucky in previous encounters. The arming process itself becomes ceremonial. Each piece of armor is applied in a specific order, with attendants assisting in the precise fitting and securing of straps and buckles. Your trainer inspects each component, making minute adjustments for optimal protection and mobility. The helmet, symbol of the gladiator's anonymized identity, is carried rather than worn until the moment before entering the arena. Once the helmet goes on, explains the doctor during final instructions, you are no longer a man, but a symbol. Remember your training. Die well if you must die. This transformation from individual to archetype was central to the gladiatorial experience. The helmet physically obscured your features, while the stylized fighting styles converted personal combat into ritualized performance. This dehumanization served both practical purposes, making killing easier, and cultural ones, allowing Romans to enjoy lethal violence without confronting its full moral implications. The final pregame ritual might be the most psychologically significant, the testing of weapons against a wooden post. Each gladiator demonstrates the sharpness and effectiveness of their assigned weapons before officials and representatives of the game's editor. This served practical verification that equipment met standards, but it also constituted the last moment to mentally prepare before combat. As you drive your Sika into the wooden post, feeling the blade bite deep into the weathered wood, the abstract concept of lethal combat suddenly crystallizes into physical reality. The weapon in your hand is designed to penetrate human flesh with the same efficiency it displays against the practice target. Within hours, you will either use it to wound another human being or feel its counterpart pierce your own body. The pre-game rituals culminate in a solemn procession to the holding cells beneath the arena. Here, in the damp, shadowy chambers that reek of fear, blood, and animal musk. You'll wait with your fellow gladiators for the trumpets that signal the beginning of the games. Some men pray, others sit in stony silence. A few engage in gallows humor. All are transformed by the ritualistic journey from trainee to performance combatant. What modern athletes might recognize as pre-competition visualization or mental preparation takes a drastically different form in gladiatorial context. You're not merely preparing to compete, you're preparing to potentially die or kill. The rituals you've just experienced weren't designed to optimize performance in the modern sporting sense, but to transform ordinary men into extraordinary symbols, living embodiments of virtues, courage, discipline, and ultimately, the Roman fascination with dignified death. The sun beats down mercilessly as you stand in the arena, sweat mixing with blood on your skin. The crowd's roar has become a constant background noise at this point, like the ocean's waves, sometimes swelling, sometimes receding, but never truly silent. You've survived your first few fights by some miracle, but you're learning quickly that fame is a double-edged sword in this world. Recognition brings both privilege and peril. If you've managed to win a few matches and caught the crowd's attention, your face might appear on graffiti around the city, crude caricatures of your fighting stance, accompanied by boastful slogans. Threeks destroys all who face him, or watch Murmillo crush bones like twigs. These street advertisements serve as ancient billboards, drawing crowds to your next appearance. The promoters love a fighter with drawing power. With fame comes better food, moving beyond the basic barley porridge to meat and wine. Your sleeping quarters might improve slightly, perhaps a smaller room with fewer gladiators crammed together. The Lanista begins to treat you as an investment rather than expendable property. You're worth more alive than dead now, which is the closest thing to security you've felt since being captured or sold into this life. But fame is also dangerous. Other gladiators eye you with jealousy, some plotting to sabotage you during training. You must sleep with one eye open because rivals know that defeating a popular fighter means instant notoriety. The crowd loves nothing more than an upset, a reversal of fortune, the mighty brought low before their very eyes. And then there's the attention from Roman citizens. Wealthy women in particular develop obsessions with successful gladiators. Remember how I mentioned the erotic appeal earlier? Well, now you're experiencing it firsthand. Mysterious gifts appear at the ludus, exotic fruits, wine, even jewelry. Notes requesting private performances are delivered by slaves. This is treacherous territory. Sleeping with a Roman matron could mean instant execution if discovered by her husband. Yet, refusing could earn you a powerful enemy who might arrange for your next match to be particularly unbalanced. Some gladiators leverage their fame into business opportunities. The more entrepreneurial fighters sell souvenir items, locks of hair, sweat-soaked cloths, even the dust from their feet mixed with oil as an aphrodisiac. You might find yourself endorsing certain taverns or bathhouses, appearing briefly to draw customers before being hustled back to the ludus by guards. Your signature wooden practice sword could fetch a handsome price from collectors. Fame also means you're now worth ransoming. If you came from a wealthy family before falling into slavery or debt, they might now hear of your success and consider buying your freedom. This happens rarely, but the possibility dangles like a distant star, something to fix your gaze upon during the darkest nights. The crowd's adoration is fickle, though. One bad performance, one display of cowardice, and they turn on you like wolves. The same voices that chanted your name now howl for your death. The same hands that threw flowers now point thumbs down. Fame in ancient Rome was always balanced on a knife's edge. Perhaps most unsettling is the realization that as your star rises, so too does the quality of your opponents. No more fighting inexperienced recruits or criminals with no combat training. Now you face veterans, champions from other ludi, men who have killed dozens in the arena. The Lanista can charge more for matching famous fighters, and the crowd expects increasingly spectacular contests. Your odds of survival decrease with each victory, a cruel mathematics that defies the natural order. You're also expected to maintain a certain persona now. If you've become known as a fierce, merciless fighter, showing mercy might disappoint your fans. If you're beloved for your technical skill and flourishes, a straightforward kill seems anticlimactic. You become trapped in the character you've created, a performer as much as a fighter. Some gladiators even adopt stage names and elaborate backstories, further blurring the line between their true selves and their arena personas. Remember that helmet that seemed so heavy during your first days of training. Now it feels like a sanctuary, the only place where your expressions remain private, where the weight of fame momentarily lifts from your shoulders. Behind that metal face, you can grimace in pain, weep in fear, or panic without the crowd judging your every reaction. That helmet has become your last refuge of humanity in a world that treats you as something between an entertainer and a wild animal. Sleep comes with difficulty now. Before, exhaustion would claim you quickly after training. Now, your mind races with tactical considerations about tomorrow's opponent, replays the mistakes of your last fight, calculates the political implications of showing mercy to a fallen aristocrat's favorite fighter. Fame has robbed you of simple rest, replacing it with the constant awareness that thousands of lives orbit around your performance. Gamblers, promoters, fans, enemies, and your fellow gladiators. And yet, despite everything, you find yourself craving the crowd's approval. When they chant your name, something primal ignites within your chest. The human need for recognition, for significance, doesn't disappear even in these dehumanizing circumstances. You've begun to understand why some freed gladiators voluntarily return to the arena. They miss this twisted form of glory, this distorted reflection of immortality. The door to the armamentarium creaks open, and you step inside what could easily be described as ancient Rome's most specialized boutique. Rows of weapons line the walls, swords of various lengths and shapes, tridents, nets, daggers, spears, bows, and exotic arms from the far reaches of the empire. No gladiator simply grabs whatever weapon strikes their fancy. Your fighting style has been predetermined, and your equipment reflects an elaborate system designed to create balanced, entertaining matchups. You've been assigned to one of the major gladiatorial types, each with its own distinct equipment, fighting style, and cultural connotations. This type will become your identity, your brand, and your prison. The Lanista didn't choose randomly. He assessed your build, background, and natural aptitudes before deciding how you'd be marketed to the bloodthirsty crowds. If you're tall and imposing, you might be cast as a secutor, the pursuer. You'd wear a streamlined helmet with minimal eye holes and a rounded top, designed specifically to prevent Auriciarius's net from catching on it. Your weapon would be the gladius, that iconic short sword of the Roman legions, complemented by a large rectangular shield. Your nemesis would be the aforementioned Riciarius, the fisherman-styled fighter who wields net and trident in a deadly dance of distance management. Perhaps you're agile rather than bulky. In that case, welcome to life as a Threeks, styled after the warriors of Thrace. Your curved Sika sword makes distinctive slashing wounds that please the crowd, while your small square shield forces you to be defensive and strategic. Your legs are protected by high greaves, but your chest remains vulnerable. You'll typically face the Murmillo, a heavily armored opponent whose fish-crested helmet nods to maritime themes in gladiatorial symbolism. Speaking of the Murmillo, if you're sturdily built, but not exceptionally tall, you might find yourself in this role. With your large oblong shield and gladius, you're essentially fighting in the style of a Roman legionary, a deliberate choice that pits Rome against various foreign fighting styles in a propaganda-laden spectacle. Your helmet features a broad brim and wire face guard, topped with that distinctive fish crest that earns you the nickname Fishman among your fellow fighters. The most vulnerable and perhaps most skilled gladiator type is the Riciarius, the net fighter who represents a fisherman. With no helmet and minimal armor, just a shoulder guard called a gallerus protecting your left side, you rely entirely on mobility and distance control. Your net can entangle opponents or obscure their vision, while your trident keeps them at bay. When they close distance, you resort to a dagger. Riciarii suffer the lowest status among gladiators due to their lack of protective equipment, which the Romans interpreted as less masculine. Yet, surviving as a Riciarius requires exceptional skill, as you have almost no margin for error. Other specialized types exist too. The Dimicaris wields two swords simultaneously. The Esidarius fights from a British-style chariot before dismounting for close combat. The Andabati wear helmets without eye holes, fighting essentially blind to the crowd's sadistic delight. The Sagittarius uses bow and arrow, rarely seen, but spectacular when included. The Laquarius wields a lasso alongside a sword, attempting to snare opponents before closing for the kill. Once your type is assigned, your training becomes hyper-specialized. Hours spent practicing the same movements until they become muscle memory, drilled into your nervous system so deeply that you could execute them while half-conscious, which, given the inevitability of head trauma in the arena, is precisely what might keep you alive one day. Your equipment isn't simply handed to you. Each piece requires maintenance and personalization. The leather straps of your armor need oiling to prevent them from cracking under the Mediterranean sun. Metal components must be polished and checked for structural integrity after each fight. Your sword's edge requires constant attention, too sharp, and it chips against armor, too dull, and it fails to penetrate when that crucial opening appears. There's an intimacy that develops between a gladiator and his equipment. Your helmet, once claustrophobic, becomes a familiar space. You learn its blind spots through countless painful lessons. The weight of your shield, once burning your shoulder, becomes an extension of your arm. Your sword's balance feels as natural as the weight of your own hand. This intimacy is both practical and psychological. Many gladiators develop superstitions around their equipment, refusing to fight if their lucky arm guard is damaged, or if their helmet doesn't sit just right. You begin to understand why the armamentarium is always locked and guarded, not just to prevent gladiators from arming themselves for rebellion, but because this equipment represents significant financial investment for the Lanista. A full set of gladiatorial armor could cost the equivalent of 2 years' salary for an average Roman worker. The exotic metals, skilled craftsmanship, and decorative elements aren't just functional, they're part of the spectacle. The weight of your equipment varies dramatically based on your assigned type. A heavily armored crupularius might carry over 80 pounds of protection, his entire body encased in metal, moving like a human tank. Meanwhile, a retiarius might carry less than 15 pounds, relying on speed rather than protection. Most gladiators fall somewhere between, typically burdened with 30-40 pounds of strategically placed armor that protects vital areas while leaving others exposed for crowd-pleasing injuries. Remember that unlike modern sports equipment designed primarily for protection, gladiatorial gear was engineered for entertainment value. Your armor intentionally leaves certain areas vulnerable to create opportunities for non-fatal but spectacular injuries. The shoulder might be heavily armored while the thigh remains exposed, allowing for bloody but survivable wounds that satisfy the crowd without immediately ending the match. It's protection designed by committee, with the spectators' enjoyment taking precedence over your safety. As you suit up for the arena, each piece of equipment clicks into place like the components of your public persona. The helmet conceals your fear. The shield presents your fighting school's insignia to the crowd. The distinctive silhouette of your armor signals to spectators which fighting style they can expect. You're no longer just a man. You're a walking embodiment of a gladiatorial archetype, bound by its limitations and playing by its rules in a theater of controlled violence. The Lannister's voice cuts through the pre-fight tension like a blade through flesh. "Remember your training," he says, not bothering to wish you luck. Gods decide luck, training decides survival. You're escorted through the tunnel that leads to the arena's entrance, the same path that countless men before you have walked, many never to return. The sound builds as you approach the light, a rumbling that vibrates through your bones before it ever reaches your ears. Then comes the moment that separates gladiatorial combat from every other form of ancient warfare, the pampa, or opening parade. Far from simply rushing into battle, gladiatorial games opened with elaborate ceremony that would make modern sporting events seem understated by comparison. Politics, religion, entertainment, and violence converge in this quintessentially Roman spectacle. First, trumpets blare to silence the crowd, though silence is a relative term in an amphitheater holding 50,000 people. The editor, the wealthy Roman funding these games, enters first in a chariot, dressed in the purple-bordered toga of a magistrate if he holds public office. He's followed by lictors carrying fasces, bundles of rods symbolizing his authority to punish. This is not merely entertainment. It's a political statement, a demonstration of the editor's wealth and power, his gift to the people of Rome. Religious elements follow. Priests lead sacrificial animals bedecked with flowers. Statues of gods are carried on platforms, particularly Mars, the god of war, and Nemesis, goddess of vengeance and balance. Perfumed clouds from incense burners waft through the air, creating a strange juxtaposition. The sweet scent of frankincense mingling with the arena's undertones of blood and sand. Then come the musicians, flutists, trumpeters, and hydraulics players operating a primitive pipe organ powered by water pressure. The music builds anticipation, and during the fights, punctuates dramatic moments like a film score. Some evidence suggests that gladiators even fought to specific musical compositions, creating a choreographed spectacle where even violence followed rhythm. Finally, your moment arrives. You march with your fellow gladiators in formation, grouped by type, Thracians with Thracians, secutors with secutors. Unlike the dark, hidden entrance to modern boxing rings or MMA cages, you're displayed like merchandise, marched slowly around the entire circumference of the arena so spectators can appraise you, decide their favorites, and place their bets. As you process before the editor's box, you and your fellow gladiators raise your right arms in unison and deliver the famous salute. Ave, Caesar, mortuary te salutant. Hail, Caesar. Those who are about to die salute you. Historians debate how common this precise phrase was It's only specifically documented at a naval battle staged by Emperor Claudius. But some form of formal salute was standard practice, a reminder that your blood would spill for Rome's entertainment. After the parade concludes, weapons are inspected publicly. This serves both practical and theatrical purposes. Practically, it ensures fairness, no secretly sharpened edges or tampered equipment. Theatrically, it builds tension, like the showing of instruments before torture. A referee, the summa rudes, checks each weapon's sharpness and each piece of armor's integrity. This official, often a retired gladiator himself, will oversee your match, enforcing rules with a long wooden rod that gives him his title. With inspections complete, pairs of gladiators are announced. The matchups aren't random. They're carefully planned for maximum entertainment value. Popular fighters face worthy opponents. Rookies fight other rookies. Specific gladiatorial types are pitted against their traditional counterparts. Retiarius versus Secutor, Threeks versus Murmillo. The crowd roars or boos as each pairing is announced, reacting to fighters' reputations and the implied quality of the upcoming match. You're paired against a fighter from another ludus, someone you've never trained with or against. This is intentional. Fighting a familiar opponent might lead to pulled punches or predetermined outcomes. The Lannister wants authentic competition, genuine danger. Your opponent's type is the natural counterpart to yours, creating the stylistic clash that audiences crave. Speed versus power, offense versus defense, technique versus brute force. Before combat begins, light wooden weapons are distributed for a warm-up display called prelucio. This preliminary sparring serves multiple purposes. It loosens your muscles, gives the crowd a preview of fighting styles, and allows spectators to finalize their bets based on what they observe. You exchange rapid, showy blows with your opponent, neither of you revealing your true tactics or full capabilities. It's a dance, a tease, a marketing preview. Musicians play during this warm-up, setting a festive tone. Wine flows in the stands. Food vendors hawk their wares. The atmosphere more closely resembles a modern sporting event than a solemn death match. Children attend with their parents. Young men study fighting techniques. Women assess the physical specimens before them. Senators network in the premium seating sections. All social classes are present, though strictly segregated by seating area. The poor high up in the nosebleed section, the wealthy in cushioned seats near the action. Finally, the summa rudes signals the end of warm-ups. Wooden practice weapons are exchanged for real ones. A hush falls over the crowd, that peculiar silence of mass anticipation. The referee barks a single command: pugnate, fight, and with that, the difference between training and reality collapses. This is no longer practice. The blade in your opponent's hand is sharp. The distance between you is no longer academic, but existential. Theory transforms into desperate, sweating, bleeding practice. You circle your opponent, suddenly aware of how different the arena sand feels compared to the training ground. Looser, deeper, more treacherous. That sand, brought at great expense from Egypt because of its superior blood absorption qualities, seems to grip at your feet. The sun positions that you carefully studied now matter in ways you couldn't have anticipated. Squinting into direct light means missing a crucial feint. Seeing the shadow of a weapon before the weapon itself creates split-second advantages. The crowd's noise swells and recedes like ocean waves, sometimes distilling into chants of a fighter's name or shouts of advice that would be tactically suicidal to follow. You realize now what veteran gladiators meant when they said the crowd becomes both everyone and no one, an entity unto itself, with moods and desires of its own, something to be played to or ignored depending on the moment's tactical demands. Your heart pounds against your ribs like a prisoner demanding release as you exchange the first series of blows with your opponent. The clang of metal striking metal rings differently here than it did in practice, sharper, more consequential. Everything you've learned in training compresses into each heartbeat, each decision carrying the weight of potential death. You're discovering the vast gulf between training for combat and actually fighting for your life. The physical reality of gladiatorial combat bears little resemblance to Hollywood's choreographed dance. Real fights rarely lasted more than 10-15 minutes. Human bodies simply can't sustain intense combat for extended periods, especially under the crushing Mediterranean sun while wearing metal armor. Most bouts ended with exhaustion as much as with wounds. Imagine sprinting while carrying a heavy backpack in 90-degree heat while someone tries to stab you. Now imagine doing this in front of 50,000 screaming spectators whose entertainment depends on your willingness to risk death. Within minutes, your lungs burn. Sweat pours into your eyes, stinging and blurring your vision at critical moments. The helmet that seemed merely uncomfortable during training now feels like a personal torture device. Breathing becomes labored, each inhale drawing hot, metallic-tasting air through the restrictive mouthpiece. Your sword arm grows leaden, each parry requiring increasingly desperate effort. You notice your opponent is also struggling, his attacks slowing, his footwork becoming sluggish. The crowd either doesn't notice or doesn't care about this very human limitation. They jeer at moments of caution, demanding constant action regardless of physical realities. The referee occasionally prods passive fighters with his staff, enforcing the understanding that defensive fighting, while tactically sound, makes for poor entertainment. Blood appears early, most often from superficial cuts to exposed limbs. These wounds rarely kill immediately, but serve to make the sand treacherous. You slip slightly on a darkened patch beneath your feet, nearly costing you everything. The famous Egyptian sand of the arena, chosen for its ability to absorb blood quickly, can only do so much when bodily fluids flow freely. Fighters learn to read the arena floor like a map, avoiding slick areas that could mean the difference between life and death. What scholars often miss in their analysis of gladiatorial combat is the psychological dimension. Each fighter engages in constant calculation. How injured is my opponent really? Is he feigning greater exhaustion than he feels? Should I press my advantage now or conserve energy? Is the crowd with me or against me? How will this affect my survival if I lose? These thoughts race through your mind, even as you mechanically execute the fighting patterns drilled into your muscle memory. Spectators, meanwhile, evaluate the fight with surprising sophistication. They can distinguish between genuine combat and staged performances. They recognize technical skill and tactical decision-making. While bloodlust certainly drives much of the audience's engagement, there's also an appreciation for martial excellence that transcends the mere spectacle of violence. You hear specific cheers when you execute a particularly difficult defensive maneuver, recognition from those who understand the skill required. The psychological pressure intensifies when you land a significant blow, driving your opponent to one knee. The crowd roars, sensing a potential conclusion. This moment, when one gladiator gains decisive advantage, triggers the most famous aspect of these contests. Your opponent, bleeding heavily from a thigh wound, drops his shield and raises his left index finger, the digitus pollex, the universal signal of submission. Combat immediately stops. The referee interposes himself between you and your fallen opponent. All eyes turn toward the editor's box, where the wealthy Roman funding these games prepares to make his judgment. Your defeated opponent's life now hangs in the balance of symbolism and crowd sentiment. Contrary to popular imagination, the editor doesn't simply give a thoughtless thumbs up or thumbs down. The decision process is nuanced, considering multiple factors. Did the losing gladiator fight bravely? Is he a crowd favorite? How expensive would he be to replace? Has the crowd seen enough blood today? Or do they crave more? The editor, ostensibly honoring the will of the crowd while actually pursuing his own political interests, makes a calculated decision. The crowd's famous pollis verso, turned thumb gesture, has been debated by historians for centuries. While popular culture depicts thumbs down as the death signal, some scholarly evidence suggests the opposite, that thumbs pressed down against clenched fingers signaled the sword should be lowered, mercy, while thumbs up mimicked the throat-cutting gesture, death. Regardless of the specific gesture, the crowd's chanting and arm movements make their preference clear. In this instance, the crowd appears divided. Your opponent fought well before his injury, showing skill and courage. Many spectators wave cloths or make the mercy gesture. Others, perhaps having bet against him, call for death. The editor stands, dramatically holding his own gesture until the crowd quiets in anticipation. His thumb extends. Life is granted. The crowd erupts in approval. Mercy for a worthy fighter enhances the editor's reputation for discernment and justice. You help your opponent to his feet, a show of respect that further endears you to the spectators. He'll return to his ludus, receive medical treatment, and fight another day if his wounds heal properly. You've survived, and more importantly, you've impressed. Attendants rush forward, pressing cloths against your wounds. A cup of watered wine is thrust into your hand. You raise it toward the editor's box in thanks, then toward the crowd, who chant your fighting name with increasing fervor. But your day isn't finished. Lesser games might feature single combat, but any respectable Munus gladiatorial show includes multiple matches for featured fighters. You're led from the arena to a waiting area where physicians assess your injuries. Nothing fatal or debilitating. You'll fight again before the day ends. A slave wipes blood from your armor, while another rehydrates you with water and electrolyte-rich pasca, a vinegar-based drink that prevents cramping. During this brief respite, you watch other matches from the holding area. Some end as yours did, with submission and mercy. Others conclude more permanently, with the defeated fighter receiving the final blow, a precise stab to the neck or chest, delivered with practiced efficiency by the victor. When this happens, specialized arena attendants, dressed as the underworld ferryman Charon or the messenger god Mercury, rush forward with hot irons to verify death and carry away the body, accompanied by attendants spreading fresh sand over bloodstains. Between bouts, arena workers rake the fighting area, removing dangerous debris and evening out the surface. Others check the wooden barrier separating fighters from spectators, ensuring no damage threatens audience safety. The games are meticulously organized, a machine of entertainment where even death fits neatly into the schedule. Intermission acts fill gaps between fights, executions of criminals, exotic animal hunts, or comedic performances that provide emotional contrast to the gladiatorial combats. As you're called for your second fight of the day, you realize how the Romans have perfected the packaging of violence as entertainment, a system so effective that spectators of all ages and classes attend without moral qualm, seeing this not as cruelty, but as demonstration of virtues, manly courage, and discipline that built the empire itself. And now, rising on shaky legs to face your next opponent, you've become not just subject to this system, but integral to it, a commodity valued precisely for your willingness to bleed. Diet becomes crucial to recovery. While the standard gladiatorial fare emphasized building bulk, injured fighters receive different nutrition, focusing on healing. More protein appears in your meals: eggs, cheese, occasionally meat. Legumes provide sustenance without taxing digestion. Wine is allowed in moderation for its calming effects and perceived health benefits. This recovery diet, while superior to what most Romans ate, has specific purpose, returning you to fighting condition as quickly as possible. During convalescence, you observe other injured gladiators at various stages of recovery. Some will never fight again, their injuries too severe for ancient medicine to address. These men face uncertain futures. A few having served honorably, might be retained as trainers. Others will be sold to less prestigious fighting schools where standards are lower. The least fortunate might be sold as ordinary slaves, their fighting days providing no lasting security. You also witness death in the valetudinarium, not the spectacular public deaths of the arena, but the quiet, ignoble endings of infection and internal bleeding. Bodies are removed with minimal ceremony. Occasionally, a popular fighter receives funeral rites attended by his comrades, but most are disposed of with efficiency that underscores your fundamental status as property rather than person. As your wound begins healing, light training resumes. Range of motion exercises prevent stiffness in the injured shoulder. Walking maintains general conditioning. The doctors monitor your progress, assessing when you can return to weapons training. Your fighting value justifies this rehabilitation investment, but you're acutely aware that another serious injury might exhaust the Lannisters' patience. Every gladiator exists perpetually on the edge of expendability. Physical recovery progresses in parallel with psychological readjustment. The mind must be prepared to enter the arena again, to face death once more. Some fighters never regain their nerve after serious injury, becoming hesitant and defensive, fighting patterns that audiences quickly recognize and punish with derision. Others develop fatalistic acceptance that enables continued performance, but hollows them from within. A few seem genuinely unaffected, whether through remarkable mental resilience or damaged emotional capacity. One unexpected aspect of recovery is the camaraderie. Despite competition in the arena, gladiators develop bonds through shared experience that few outside their world could comprehend. Veterans share healing techniques learned through years of injuries. Younger fighters look after older ones whose bodies recover more slowly. Information about which physicians can be trusted and which should be avoided circulates in whispered conversations. This subculture of mutual support exists beneath the violent competition of the arena. Men helping each other survive a system designed to commodify their suffering. By the end of 2 weeks, your wound has closed cleanly, leaving another scar to join the collection accumulating on your body. Each mark tells a story of survival, a battle overcome. Physically, you're deemed ready to resume full training. Mentally, you've processed another brush with mortality, recalibrating your understanding of your own fragility and resilience. You're changed, not just by the injury itself, but by the recovery journey, another transformation in the ongoing metamorphosis from whoever you were before to the gladiator you've become. As you rejoin regular training, you carry invisible wounds alongside the visible ones. Heightened awareness of your vulnerability, deeper understanding of the medical realities that constrain your existence, and the sobering knowledge that while you survived this injury, countless others didn't, and ultimately, your odds grow worse with each arena appearance. Yet you also carry something else, increasing status within the gladiatorial brotherhood, earned through demonstration of that quintessentially Roman virtue, the ability to endure pain with dignity and return to face danger once again. Diet becomes crucial to recovery. While the standard gladiatorial fare emphasized building bulk, injured fighters receive different nutrition, focusing on healing. More protein appears in your meals: eggs, cheese, occasionally meat. Legumes provide sustenance without taxing digestion. Wine is allowed in moderation for its calming effects and perceived health benefits. This recovery diet, while superior to what most Romans ate, has specific purpose, returning you to fighting condition as quickly as possible. During convalescence, you observe other injured gladiators at various stages of recovery. Some will never fight again, their injuries too severe for ancient medicine to address. These men face uncertain futures. A few, having served honorably, might be retained as trainers. Others will be sold to less prestigious fighting schools where standards are lower. The least fortunate might be sold as ordinary slaves, their fighting days providing no lasting security. You also witness death in the valetudinarium, not the spectacular, public deaths of the arena, but the quiet, ignoble endings of infection and internal bleeding. Bodies are removed with minimal ceremony. Occasionally, a popular fighter receives funeral rites attended by his comrades, but most are disposed of with efficiency that underscores your fundamental status as property rather than person. As your wound begins healing, light training resumes. Range of motion exercises prevent stiffness in the injured shoulder. Walking maintains general conditioning. The doctors monitor your progress, assessing when you can return to weapons training. Your fighting value justifies this rehabilitation investment, but you're acutely aware that another serious injury might exhaust the Lannister's patience. Every gladiator exists perpetually on the edge of expendability. Physical recovery progresses in parallel with psychological readjustment. The mind must be prepared to enter the arena again, to face death once more. Some fighters never regain their nerve after serious injury, becoming hesitant and defensive, fighting patterns that audiences quickly recognize and punish with derision. Others develop fatalistic acceptance that enables continued performance, but hollows them from within. A few seem genuinely unaffected, whether through remarkable mental resilience or damaged emotional capacity. One unexpected aspect of recovery is the camaraderie. Despite competition in the arena, gladiators develop bonds through shared experience that few outside their world could comprehend. Veterans share healing techniques learned through years of injuries. Younger fighters look after older ones whose bodies recover more slowly. Information about which physicians can be trusted and which should be avoided circulates in whispered conversations. This subculture of mutual support exists beneath the violent competition of the arena. Men, helping each other survive a system designed to commodify their suffering. By the end of 2 weeks, your wound has closed cleanly, leaving another scar to join the collection accumulating on your body. Each mark tells a story of survival, a battle overcome. Physically, you're deemed ready to resume full training. Mentally, you've processed another brush with mortality, recalibrating your understanding of your own fragility and resilience. You're changed, not just by the injury itself, but by the recovery journey, another transformation in the ongoing metamorphosis from whoever you were before to the gladiator you've become. As you rejoin regular training, you carry invisible wounds alongside the visible ones. Heightened awareness of your vulnerability, deeper understanding of the medical realities that constrain your existence, and the sobering knowledge that while you survived this injury, countless others didn't. And ultimately, your odds grow worse with each arena appearance. Yet you also carry something else, increasing status within the gladiatorial brotherhood, earned through demonstration of that quintessentially Roman virtue, the ability to endure pain with dignity and return to face danger once again. Months pass, perhaps years. Time blurs in the repetitive cycle of training, fighting, recovering, and training again. Your body has become a map of scars, each with its own story. That puckered line across your thigh, a Thracian Sika blade during the Floralia Festival Games, the jagged mark on your forearm, deflecting a trident in Capua's arena, the barely visible indent on your temple, a shield boss impact that nearly ended everything during the games, celebrating the Emperor's birthday. You've survived longer than most. The average gladiatorial career lasted only 10 fights, or about 2 to 3 years. The fact that you're still breathing places you in a rare category, the veterans. Your fighting name now draws crowds. Your appearance commands higher fees. Younger fighters study your techniques during training. You've become that most valuable of commodities, a gladiatorial star. With veteran status comes the increasing possibility of the wooden sword, the rudis. This simple object represents freedom, awarded to gladiators who have served exceptionally well, typically after 3 to 5 years of notable performances. The rudis could be granted by the editor of the games with the crowd's approval, or by imperial decree for particularly famous fighters. It didn't automatically confer Roman citizenship, but it did transform you from property to person, from commodity to free man. Freedom, however, presents its own challenges. After years institutionalized within the ludus system, many freed gladiators struggle with independence. Some lack marketable skills beyond fighting. Others miss the structure, purpose, and even the camaraderie of gladiatorial life. Roman society, while admiring fighting prowess, still stigmatizes former gladiators. Freedom may mean trading one form of confinement for another, physical chains replaced by social limitations. This explains a historical curiosity that that mystifies modern observers. Some freed gladiators voluntarily returned to the arena. These octoratus fighters, free men fighting by choice rather than compulsion, negotiated appearance fees and fought under contract. Their motivations varied from financial need to addiction to fame to simple inability to readjust to ordinary life. Having experienced the roar of 50,000 voices chanting their name, mundane existence felt unbearably quiet. For some, the final exit from gladiatorial life came not through death or the wooden sword, but through promotion within the system. Exceptional fighters sometimes became doctors, training the next generation of arena combatants. The most business savvy might eventually become Lannister themselves, owning and operating the very type of establishment that once owned them. These rare success stories represented the ultimate subversion of the system, the property becoming the property owner. But for most, the end came in one of two ways: death in the arena or retirement into obscurity. Retirement typically occurred when a fighter's skills noticeably declined, making him less valuable as entertainment. Some transitioned to arena staff, referees, equipment managers, or assistants to the editor. Others leveraged their fame into small business ventures, gladiator-themed taverns, equipment shops, or performance schools, teaching basic techniques to aristocratic youth fascinated by arena culture. Archaeological evidence from gladiator graveyards provides unsentimental insight into their final destinations. Specialized burial grounds existed near major amphitheaters, containing the remains of those who died in combat or from injuries. These graves often include professional equipment, a final acknowledgement of identity. Skeletal analysis reveals patterns of healed injuries, distinctive bone modifications from specific training regimens, and causes of death. Science confirms what ancient writers described. Gladiators often died from precise, targeted wounds rather than the mutilation depicted in modern media. Your own path reaches a crucial juncture when, after a particularly impressive victory against a renowned opponent, the crowd begins an unexpected chant. Rudies, Rudies, they call, thousands of voices merging into a single demand. The editor of the games, a wealthy senator seeking popular approval, stands dramatically. The arena falls silent. His hand extends, holding the simple wooden sword that represents the end of one life and the beginning of another. You kneel in the blood-soaked sand as the wooden sword touches each shoulder, mimicking the ceremony through which free men are elevated to knighthood in later centuries. Rising, you raise the rudies overhead, triggering thunderous approval from the crowd. After years of performing death, you've been granted life. After years of existing as property, you've been transformed into a person with legal standing. The transition proves disorienting. The ludus, for all its brutality, provided structure that suddenly vanishes. You sleep poorly without the familiar sounds of the gladiator quarters. Making decisions feels overwhelming. After after years of having most choices made for you. The skills that kept you alive in the arena, fighting prowess, theatrical performance, strategic violence, have limited application in civilian life. You're provided a small stipend upon release, standard practice for honorably discharged gladiators. But making it last requires financial discipline unfamiliar to someone who never managed money. Some former comrades squander their funds within weeks, ending up destitute or returning to the arena voluntarily for lack of alternatives. Others invest wisely in small businesses, leveraging their names and reputations into sustainable livelihoods. Your celebrity status follows you in complicated ways. In certain establishments, you drink for free, surrounded by civilians eager to hear arena stories. In others, your presence is unwelcome, your profession marking you as morally contaminated despite your legal freedom. Some Romans, particularly from the upper classes, remain fascinated by gladiators, but prefer to keep that fascination at a comfortable distance, admiring your kind from arena seats rather than welcoming you into their homes or businesses. You find yourself joining the population of arena veterans who inhabit a strange middle ground in Roman society, celebrated for embodying martial virtues, while simultaneously stigmatized for the commercial violence that displayed those virtues. Former gladiators often cluster in specific neighborhoods near amphitheaters, creating communities where shared experience requires no explanation. In these enclaves, the nightmares that wake you screaming, reliving arena moments when death came close enough to smell, are understood without judgment. Some veterans find purpose by capitalizing on their fame. They conduct tour of amphitheaters for provincials visiting Rome, explaining the intricate details of arena culture to wide-eyed tourists. Others perform exhibition matches with blunted weapons, demonstrating techniques without risk of serious injury. A few write memoirs dictated to scribes that become popular among literate Romans fascinated by authentic gladiatorial experiences. Faith provides another path forward for many former fighters. Mystery cults, particularly Mithraism, with its emphasis on courage and brotherhood, attract numerous arena veterans. The promise of dignity in an afterlife appeals to men who were denied dignity in much of their earthly existence. The structured hierarchy of these cults also provides a familiar social organization for those accustomed to the clearly defined roles of the ludus. Against considerable odds, you craft a life beyond the arena. The discipline that kept you alive through countless fights helps you navigate civilian challenges. The psychological resilience that allowed you to enter the arena repeatedly despite knowing the potential consequences enables you to face societal prejudice with equanimity. Your body, while marked by combat, carries strength that proves useful in certain trades and professions open to former gladiators. As years pass, you occasionally visit the amphitheater watching from the stands rather than fighting in the sand. You observe the new champions, recognizing in their movements techniques you once employed, perhaps even techniques you innovated. You notice changes in equipment, shifts in crowd preferences, evolving rules. The gladiatorial games continue their gradual transformation, as they will for centuries, until Christian emperors eventually abolish human combat while maintaining the venatio, animal hunts, that always accompanied the human contests. Sometimes, young fighters approach you after recognizing your distinctive profile or overhearing your name. They ask for advice, for stories, for validation of their chosen path. You find yourself in the strange position of being living history, a bridge between active participation and passive remembrance. The wisdom you share comes at incalculable personal cost, earned through blood and loss and narrowly averted death. And on quiet nights, when sleep proves elusive, you sometimes find yourself holding the wooden rudies, that simple object that transformed you from thing to person. You run your fingers along its smooth surface, remembering the moment it touched your shoulders, the moment when survival became truly meaningful, because it opened the possibility of living rather than merely existing. No Roman could possibly understand how profound that distinction feels to someone who has lived on the boundary between humanity and commodity, between person and property, between life and spectacle.